Now, we did a sponsored video for Contra Operation Galuga a couple of days ago, but we did want to bring the full SwitchUp review treatment of it.
Yeah, so this is almost like a reimagining of the original game or the first couple of games in terms of story and how you play. And here we'll give it the full review treatment and see exactly how it holds up. So does it blast onto the Switch or is it more of a damp squib? Well, let's find out. In terms of the story then, you play as the Contra elite force, having been sent to the Galuga archipelago where the Red Falcon are up to no good. As I mentioned, it is the same story from the original arcade games. I think the setting was changed for some of the console releases in various regions, but yeah, we're back to the Galuga archipelago for this one. So in terms of gameplay then, it is very much a run and gun in the style of the original games in the Contra series.
Yeah, it's easy to pick up and play, even if you didn't play those, and it has to be said that it is slightly easier, or at least more accessible than those titles.
Yeah, there are a few reasons for that in terms of some of the things that they've added. It is still difficult in terms of how many bullets you'll face on screen and how many enemies are thrown at you, but this does add a few things to the mix to just make it a bit more accessible, as Mark said. So first of all, any of the in-game currency that you'll gain, obviously by completing stages or how many enemies you kill, you can then spend on particular perks and abilities that will be assigned to your character as you move on. You have 2 slots, I believe it was, that you can choose which ones you want, and these could well make the game that bit easier for you depending on your playstyle.
Yeah, from that regard, it has almost, it's a skill tree system of sorts, as Glenn says. Now, in the stages themselves, you can carry 2 different weapons. You can rotate between these. There is some strategy in what you pick up and when, and especially if you're playing in co-op, if you accidentally land on a weapon, then your old one will pop out, and oftentimes your partner will accidentally pick it up, and by that time you've moved past that screen.
Yeah, that can be a bit irritating, the way that the weapons drop. It's just such an exaggerated drop. As Mark says, it can fall onto your friend and they can end up with a weapon they don't want, because generally you'll be quite close together. So it would have been nice just to see that fall on the floor and not be quite so exaggerated. But it is nice that you can store a weapon away and switch between them at any point. Just moving back to the skill tree or the perks and abilities for a minute, just to give you some sort of idea as to how they work. So it could be that you can buy into a perk so that you can always start with your favourite weapon every time that you start a new level, or you could purchase extra health points, say for example, and this game does have a health point system rather than the one-hit kills of some of the previous games, although you can switch back to that if you prefer the challenge of that original style. So in terms of the gameplay modes, you do have the story mode, which is up to 2 player, but there is also an arcade mode, which is up to 4 players. You can unlock additional characters as you make your way through story mode, one of these being the Pro Protector robot from the European version of the early games. And there was a challenge mode that you could try as well, with a number of different challenges. And these would earn you that in-game currency you could then use to buy the perks.
Now, on the subject of controls, you use the right stick to aim in any of 360 degrees, or, if you're like Glenn, you can use the D-pad, which will give you 8-way directional shooting.
Yeah, you can also lock your character in place by holding down ZR, and it's nice to see those 2 different control schemes, because I'll be honest, I wouldn't even dream of playing this game with a stick, but Mark found that more comfortable, so obviously it almost has a control scheme for every type of user.
Your character can jump and double jump, and there's also a slide move that you can perform. And the levels aren't always left to right. Sometimes they'll be vertical, sometimes you're on vehicles, and obviously there are several different bosses in here as well.
Yeah, the verticality to levels is something that carries over from those original games, and it's nice to see that return. You also have a special move that you can activate where you basically overload the weapon that you're holding, and this will cause some sort of effect. It could be bullets flying out all across the screen, but it comes at the expense of that weapon. You will then lose that weapon and go back to your default. And you can, again, going back to that skill tree, you can put points into these overloads to make them even more powerful.
Now, obviously, the Switch does have slightly more input latency than the other versions, but there's been a lot of chatter about performance and input latency online. I've tested it, as you can see on the screen. It's less than 1/4 of a second. In fact, for me personally, it wasn't even something that I felt was an issue.
No, we played through a good chunk of this game before even feeling the need to test it, and that was only because some of the noise on social media, you can see it on the screen now, so I mean, everyone's different in terms of how much they feel it affects their game, but we didn't notice it at all when you're just in the natural way of playing. Gameplay is classic Contra with a few new twists, and it scores 18 out of 20. Controls, there are some minor annoyances such as the way that weapons are dropped and how this can affect how you're playing, and some people have noticed some latency, but to be honest, I just didn't feel it at all as we were playing. They score 17.
On the subject of visuals and performance, then I think this is probably the most contentious area for a lot of people. Not because it looks bad, because actually it really doesn't. The actual visual changes, I think they're quite nice. The game runs close to native resolution. Performance is 30 frames per second. This has been tested with frame rate analysis. I think the issue people have is that sometimes it doesn't feel like 30, and that's to do with the frame delivery, something that Konami have said that they're working on, and there may even be a day one patch for this.
Yeah, that's fair to say, because when we were playing it, we were wondering whether the frame rate was dropping at times. Tested it, and it did appear for the vast majority of the time to be a consistent 30, but it does feel like that frame pacing is just off, and something feels slightly unnatural about it. But I think, as Mark said, it's down to that pacing. In terms of the visuals themselves, Mark just mentioned they do look quite pleasant, the new style. I'll be honest, I have always will prefer pixel art for such a game. I don't think the new style comes across quite as well. I think pixel art would have been a little more timeless, but what's here is still nice to look at, and there are a nice variety of backgrounds and settings that you'll go through as you play through the game.
Now, something that is a little more heinous are some of the bugs. They're not massive. Well, it depends who you are. I have a friend who hit one bug where the controls stopped working. We didn't hit that at all. We hit a few bugs, didn't we, where one situation saw us.
Yeah, basically we got to a point in the level where we were about to go up vertically, and our characters kind of got stuck on the screen, but the screen was scrolling, and we were stuck in this perpetual loop. So we quit out of that level, went back in, and personally we never saw another bug in the game. So it seems to be one of those games where it depends who you speak to, but speaking just from our personal experiences, there was that one glitch where we had to restart a level, and other than that we've been okay.
With all of that said though, we do still feel it's an area that's slightly weaker, and visuals and performance score 13 out of 20.
Yeah, we haven't touched on music very much. It is classic Contra. You'll hear some of those great themes from the past. It's got that high octane feel to it that it always had, and it definitely complements the gameplay in that respect. It gets 18 out of 20.
The game retails at £34.99. There's a physical, so to speak, in the EU, but unfortunately that's a code in the box, and there is an actual physical that can be purchased through limited run.
Yeah, disappointing to see no proper physical in Europe. That is a shame. In terms of the game itself, you're looking at 8 stages. As I said, it is potentially easier than the older games, but I think that's more down to the accessibility options that have been added than the actual gameplay. It's very fun to play with more than one person. It really does enhance the experience, and there are the different game modes in terms of arcade and challenge. It's still quite expensive for what you're getting. I mean, this is the problem. Obviously you can play Contra free, and the other games are available for relatively cheap. I think they've overpriced it, to be fair. I think that's going to be a major issue. Not a knock against the gameplay, which is fun, but considering some of the glitches and some of the other issues, I think £34.99 is too expensive. On balance, value gets 13 out of 20. To conclude, Contra Operation Galuga is definitely a throwback to those original Contra games, and if you have any love for the series, you'll definitely find enjoyment here in terms of how it plays.
Yeah, essentially it's a very good game, but potentially needed a little more time in the oven.
The issue comes with a couple of choices in terms of controls. Main one for me being the way that weapons are dropped. I did think that actually directly affected the gameplay. There are some glitches that people are experiencing. Again, we did have that one time, and the graphics for me weren't as crisp as that original pixel art style. Contra Operation Galuga gets a SwitchUp score of 79%. So there you have it. There are our thoughts on the new Contra game. What do you think? Have you noticed anything about it that we haven't in terms of glitches? Stick it all down in the comment section. It will help people to make an informed decision when they come to buying the game or not. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this one up, or anything else for that matter, you can get your eShop cards over at our website, switchup.gg. You get yourself 5% back in cash back via our SwitchUp tokens, and there are some other links down there to physical games, including PlayAsia and Red Art. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.